Hey, good morning. It's Kevin from Happy Coding. I guess good evening or good afternoon, good whatever time it is when you're watching this video. Last night or in the last video, I created this example, which defines a drawHouse function that does exactly what it says it does. It draws a house, and I showed a couple examples of different ways you can use the drawHouse function. So here in this code that I posted after the video, I posted this up on Happy Coding. So if you want to go copy paste this, you can do that. This code calls the drawHouse function 3 times, and it's sort of like a stamp that it uses to draw the same kind of house without having to repeat the same code over and over again. The draw function calls drawHouse, 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 and you get 3 houses. There are a few things I could do from here, but my sort of plan is to define another function. I'm going to call it something like drawBlock, and drawBlock will call the drawHouse function a few times in order to draw a block of houses. So thinking just a little bit more ahead, my actual end goal is to build up this kind of hierarchy of functions that will eventually let me draw a whole city maybe, or a whole neighborhood. It kind of depends on what it ends up looking like. But I want to have a few layers of function calls that I've defined that let me play around with the idea of getting more and more granular. So I'm going to define something like a draw city function, which will call draw block, maybe draw block calls draw house, and it'll all add up into something interesting. I'm hoping anyway. I haven't done this ahead of time, so I don't actually know what the end result will look like. Anyway, so that's the goal I'm shooting for, but that's probably going to take me maybe one more video, depending on the time. But today, my goal is to define that next level, and that's the drawBlock function. So the drawBlock function is going to call the drawHouse function. Anyway, so I'm going to kind of just dive right in, I think. I haven't drawn this out on a piece of paper or anything, but what I'm thinking is that a block will be 4 houses, and maybe they'll share, a yard or something. We'll see how we feel. So very similar to the drawHouse function, I think my drawBlock function is going to take 4 parameters: block x, block y, block width, and block height. And I'm going to change my draw function to call my drawBlock function. And by default, my drawBlock function doesn't do anything, so this will just be blank, and that's fine, that's expected. So right now we have sort of an empty block, and now it's our job to kind of construction workers. We have this empty block, and we should fill it. We should fill it with whatever we want. Maybe I should have gone back and given myself a couple more options, but right now I have drawHouse. I could also add things like circles and squares and whatnot, but we'll see how we feel. So this is going to be very similar to the last video, where I base my code inside the function off of the parameters that are being passed in. And so I could do something like call the drawHouse function with a x parameter of block x plus something like block width times 0.1. So I want to give just maybe a little bit of yard space or a border on the left side. So that's my x, and my y is going to be very similar. It's going to be like block y plus block height times 0.1. I realize that I tend to think in terms of these parameters and multiplying them by some decimal, but there's nothing stopping you from saying that you don't actually want to take a width and a height, and every house is the same size, and every house is, 100 by 100 pixels. That would be a fine choice, and it's kind of up to your sort of artistic choices. But for me, I kind of want to treat it as a stamp, so I get that width and height in there. And then my house width is going to be something like block width times, so I'm using 0.1 here, so I have a 0.1 border over here. I maybe want a 0.1 border over here, which would give me like a 0.3, I think. block width times 0.3, and then block width times 0.3. That's going to be block height. I hope I would have caught that eventually, but we'll see. So I've got my X, my Y, my width, and my height for the house. So these arguments get turned into these parameters, or is it the other way around? I never remember, but it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to push play, and what I hope to see is a house in the upper left corner of my block. Actually, it's going to be very small, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, so my whole block is from 25, 25 to 100, 100, which is about right here. So maybe what I can do first is draw a rectangle around my whole block, just to see the boundary of it. Block width, block height, block width, block height. So all that's going to do is draw a rectangle sort of around where the block is. That's kind of gross because I guess it's using the doorknob fill, I guess. Yeah, there we go. So my whole block is the black box here, and then I've only drawn one house so far, and I've drawn that in sort of the upper left quadrant of my block based on these calculations. So I can do a couple things. I can maybe check what would happen if I made my block wider. Looks all right. Make it a little taller. Yep. And maybe while I'm at it, what do I want to do here? Let me do something like this. Oops. Yeah, so you can see that I've got my block, and then I'm drawing my house inside of that block. And I'm going to kind of just follow that same exact pattern. So now I've drawn this house. Now I kind of want to draw this house. This house is neighbor. So I'm going to do something like block X plus block width times. So I did this at 0.1, and then I added 0.3 so that there's like the same kind of 0.1 border on each side. So this takes me to 0.5. And if I want another 0.1 border to the right of the center line, then that will take me to 0.6. The block Y is going to be the same as it was before because they're the same sort of vertical alignment. Block height times 0.1. And then I believe that my widths are going to be the same. My width and height are going to be the same. And block height times 0.3. So it's the same size, just move to the right a little bit. And yeah, there we go. I think that looks pretty good. And you can maybe start to see the power of the fact that we can rely on this draw house function. I'm not having to go in here and mess with these parameters at all. I'm not having to go in and like really think hard about, oh, exactly where is this left window X at? Because that work is done, and unless something breaks, then I don't really need to worry about it. And that's kind of the power of defining these sort of units of work. So anyway, let me just keep trucking. Let me do draw house. I'm going to draw the one down here now, and it's going to be the same X as the first house, block width times 0.1, and the Y value of my house is going to be similar to the X value of my second house, if that makes sense. So I'm going to move it kind of down by the same amount of logic, or by the same amount, do the same kind of logic. You'll see what I mean. So I'm starting with block Y, and then I'm going to go down to block width or block height times 0.5, which will take me here. And then I want to add just a little bit, and I'm going to say block height times 0.6. Times 0.6, very similar to what we did here for the X coordinate of that second house. And then old reliable, block width times 0.3, block height times 0.3. I could maybe refactor that into a variable, but we'll see how we feel. Yeah, that's down there now. I might make these a little bigger, and that might be when defining a variable might help me. But for now, let me just kind of finish this since I'm on a roll. Block house, draw house is going to be, so I've actually calculated everything I need to. So the x is going to be the same as this house. So it's going to be block x plus, what did I do? Block width times 0.6. And the y is going to be the same as this house. So it's right here, block y plus block height times 0.6. And old reliable. If you find yourself typing the exact same like piece of code, it usually means that you should change it to be like a variable or a function or something. So I'm a little suspicious that I've had to type that 4 times in a row, so I might refactor those into variables. But let's just see if it works. That's wonderful. It's been like teleported into the nether realm, and it's like all the way down there. I'm sure I did something wrong with like the block y. So block x actually looks like it's right, and then block y plus block height times 0.6. That looks right to me. Oh, the height is probably so I made it 3 instead of 0.3. Okay, so there's my block, and my block has 4 houses on it. And just for testing purposes, what I'm going to do is sort of change this around a little bit. I'm going to work just a little bit ahead and use a concept that if you're following through in the tutorials you might not have seen before, but it's basically mouse X and mouse Y give me the coordinates of the mouse, and so I'm just going to make it a little bit more interactive. So right now by default the houses are just kind of all scrunched up into the upper left corner. You can see maybe a tiny little dot. That's my tiny little neighborhood. And as soon as I move my mouse into the window, yeah, this just makes it a little easier to test out the sort of the aspect ratio and stuff. So I'm noticing like a weird interesting phenomenon where like at certain heights like it kind of snaps a little bit. Like you see like the roof looks like it's kind of overflowing the house, or it goes over the house. And I actually think that looks kind of cool, but at some point it gets a little, it just stops doing that. And I think that's all down to like the multiplication. So it comes down to like the computer doesn't actually draw like half pixels. So if your value that you're passing into a function has a half pixel, it'll kind of just cut that off. So, and it also probably comes down to like my stroke weight being 2 instead of 1. So I'm not too worried about it. The houses seem to be doing the right thing. I think that's just kind of an artifact of how I've done the multiplication. But here we go. I mean, I'm actually pretty happy with this already. Let me change this from mouse X to like, let me change it back to what it was before. Oops, there. So from here I have a few options. Let me just really quickly check the time. We're only at 13 minutes. I could go one more level, I think. You know, you could think about what you want your block to look like. Maybe there's flowers in this yard. Maybe there's a sidewalk. Maybe there's a fence. You know, maybe your neighbors don't like each other. Maybe there's some trees. You know, there's all kinds of things you could focus on, like inside of the block or inside of the draw house function. And you know, feel free to do that. But for me, I think I want to try to force myself to focus on kind of the point of what I'm trying to make here. And that is that we could keep going with this pattern. So I've got my drawblock function, and I could apply that same kind of concept that we just applied. So drawblock calls drawHouse 4 times to get a nice little block. I could define something like a drawTown function, which has a certain amount of blocks inside of it. So let me just kind of do that. drawTown. I'm choosing the word town because I don't know how to spell the word neighborhood. So I know that this probably won't actually look like a town, but neighborhood would be impossible for me to spell. So town X, town Y, town width, oops, town height. And the logic is going to be very similar. I'm tempted to just copy paste this whole thing and change all the blocks to towns, but let me avoid that temptation because maybe I want to make my town a little bit more involved, just so that we have, you know, some variety. So I'm going to actually move this up to drawTown. So right now we're drawing block. Let's draw town, and drawTown is just going to be so yeah, here's why I should not rely on copy paste, like because I forgot to change all these values. So let me do that real quick. Town, and town. Yeah, so now we're sort of back to where we started, but the draw function calls the drawTown function, and drawTown just draws a rectangle that's sort of the bounds of the town. You can think of like a welcome to our town, population, well, 0 at this point. But anyway, we want to do the same kind of logic that we did down here, only instead of drawing houses, we'll be drawing blocks. So I'm going to draw a block, and let me think about what I want my block to look, or my town to look like. I think I want my town to be maybe a couple blocks, maybe a couple roads. So yeah, maybe like a 4 blocks, but with roads between them, something like that. So what I might do is steal some of the logic that we already had down there. So I'm going to draw my upper left town using kind of the exact same logic. And you know what? Actually, I'm just going to copy paste this. This is what I would do in real life. I know it's not like the greatest example to give to people learning how to code. You're supposed to say like, oh, don't copy paste, but the reality of coding is that, you know, sometimes you do it. So I'm going to reveal that truth to you. Town width and town height. So now what I'm hoping is that I see a block up in the upper left corner of my town. And yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm getting maybe to a limit that my houses are getting a little bit too small. I could maybe decrease this stroke weight, see what that does. It looks all right, maybe. Yeah, whatever. So I think maybe what I'm going to do is make this just a little bit smaller of a border, because the town now has a border and the block also has a border, so I think that's getting a little extreme. And I might change this to like 0.35, something. Actually, I want to keep it 0.3 for now, because I want to leave room for a road in the middle. So yeah, I mean, same kind of logic. Draw a block. I want to draw the block over here now, and then I might think about a road. So same exact kind of logic. Town width, town x, 0.6. This is going to be, so I did 0.05 here. So I want this to be more to the right, actually. So it's going to be 0.65, I think. It actually doesn't really need to be like totally perfect, but we will see. Keep hitting that button. Town width, and finally town height. So now what I'm hoping to see is a town, or a block right here. I'm going to keep switching those words. Yeah, so I've got my upper left block, my upper right block. I guess I should say northeast and northwest, but whatever. Now let me think about a road. So I think my road's just going to be straight up a rectangle from the top to the bottom, and then maybe another rectangle from the left to the right. So let me think about doing that down here. So let's just do something like, so I'm going to fill it in as, I don't know, maybe not quite black, but maybe pretty dark, something like 32. I like a nice round computer sciencey number. And what I want to do is say rect has an x value of, well, town x plus, so I want to do town x plus almost 0.5, so maybe town width times 0.4, something like that. So that's my X. My Y is just going to be town Y because it starts at the top. And then my width is going to be town width times, so I started at 0.4, so I want it to be like 0.2 so that it goes to the other side of the halfway point, so it's kind of symmetrical. And then town height, and it just fits all out of code. So what I should see is a rectangle that goes from the top to the bottom. Yeah, maybe it's more like a highway. Maybe I'll decrease that size in a minute, but it doesn't look bad. And so next what I want to do is maybe a fill of, maybe I'm going to start with just making it white. I'm going to draw the line in the middle of the road just to make it a little bit more road-like. And I'm trying to think, there are a couple ways to do this. I might try to get away with just drawing a straight up line. Let's see what that looks like. Town X plus town width times 0.5, just putting it right in the middle, and then town Y, and then the same. So the width is, sorry, I'm drawing a line, that's right. So that's my top coordinate, and then my bottom coordinate is going to have the same X, town X plus town width times 0.5, and then town height, sorry, town Y plus town height, because that's the next coordinate. Sorry, I keep thinking in terms of a rectangle instead of a line. Let me maybe put a new line there. So I've got my X, I've got my Y, I've got my X, I've got my Y, and I've spelled those all right, I think. Yeah, so you can barely see it because I forgot that this needed to be stroke. Again, I'm thinking rectangles, but yeah, okay. So the important thing is that the line is where I want it to be. I can fix this stroke by where do I need the stroke? The stroke. So here's where it kind of pays off a little bit. So I need to turn the stroke back to black, and I need to do it in a couple places. But so you notice that all of my houses have this white outline. And again, if your artistic spirit takes you in that direction, then go for it. But I think I want my houses to have a black outline. So I don't need to change that in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different places. I only need to change it in one place because of the sort of stamp nature of this draw house function. So I'm going to put it right here, stroke 0, and what should happen is now all of my houses will have the correct black outline. And well, it would if I spelled things correctly. And there you go. So my houses are back to having their black outline, and I didn't have to change it in 8 places. Changed it in 1 place, and it applied sort of everywhere. Cool. So then maybe I want to put it like here to reset the black outline, and there we go. I'm going to maybe change that line to be yellow. So stroke R and G. It's going to be like neon yellow, but let's see. Yeah, I actually like that. So there's my road, there's my houses, and let me just check the time real quick. 23. Yeah, I'm gonna try to finish this up by 30, and I think you can kind of plan ahead to where I'm going. But what I want to do is draw 2 more blocks and then 1 more road. So let me just kind of do this. Let me cheat a little bit. Let me do it this way. As always, kids, don't do what I'm doing. Do what I'm saying. Draw block, and then this is going to be town X, town width, and what did I do? I did 0.05 here. I'm not sure how I feel about that actually, but whatever. Town width, town height, and what did I do this? I did 6.5, I think. So these are town width. I'm doing this because it ended up being pretty much the exact same logic, and this would change if, say, I wanted these to take up a different kind of pattern, but I'm feeling a little bit lazy today, so bear with me. I think this needs to be 6.5. I'm sure I'm going to mess something up here and I'm going to have to fix it, and that's sort of the danger of copy pasting, because I'm not actually taking the time to understand this code. I'm just sort of hoping for the best, and that's not always a great thing to be doing. So let me just hit play and see what breaks. And wow, by some miracle that actually worked. I think the miracle is that it doesn't actually matter if I'm off by just a little bit. I think that this right edge might actually end up being just a little bit bigger than that left edge, but we're kind of working at pixel sizes that you can't actually see the imperfections, so I'm going to lean into that a little bit today. And then the last thing I want to do is draw the sort of east to west or west to east, depending on which direction you're going, road. So I want to do, let me do it this way. Let me lay my black top down, and then let me paint my little center lines. All right, so I'm going to do a rectangle from 0, and what is the y? The y is going to be very similar, so it's going to be to what the x value was here. So it's like town y plus town height times 0.4 maybe, and then the width is going to be town width, and then the height is going to be something like town height times 0.2. And I'm a little suspicious that doesn't equal the exact same thing, because the exact same line length, and I think it's because this shouldn't be 0. So I'm thinking in terms of like relative, so it should be 0 relative to town y, so, or town x. Yeah, that seems like it might be better. Now I'm a little suspicious it's longer, but whatever. So it's town x starts over here, and then town y plus town height times 0.4 starts at here, goes all the way over, and then goes down a little bit. I think that's right. Yeah, so you can kind of maybe see an artifact of me having a stroke of 0 here, so I might take this stroke away. Yeah, it's looking a little better. And then my line is going to be the same kind of logic. So town x and town y plus town width times 0.5. So I'm starting right here, and then I'm going to go all the way over to town x plus town width times, that's right. So all the way over here, and then same y, because I'm not going up or down, it's just going left and right. So town, sorry, I'm having a moment. Town y plus town height times 0.5, and I think I noticed a typo, so this is going to be town height when I'm dealing with y. So we'll check this, but let's see. So it looks pretty good. I'm a little suspicious that I might have messed up a width and a height, so to test that out, I'm going to make this bigger so see if it still works. And it looks like it does. And let's make it the other way. And yeah, I mean, we're getting kind of to the limit of how small the houses can be and still be visible, but it's okay. So there is what I'm calling a town, but maybe it's more of a neighborhood, and you can kind of probably guess at where the next video is going to go, but I think I'm kind of at time, and I'm going to try to keep these videos to about a half an hour rather than going over. So the next step would be to define something like a draw city function, and it would draw a bunch of towns. And so maybe just to play around with this just a little bit, I'm going to go back to the idea of working ahead just a little bit. I don't love that I'm doing this, but it makes demonstrating it a little easier. So what I'm going to do is draw a town at mouse X, mouse Y, and let's give it something like 100, 100, something like that. So my draw function, I need to move some stuff around. So now I've created kind of like a drawing program where every time I click the mouse, I draw a town, and the town is this whole thing. So I've got nothing drawn by default except the background. Let me draw a town like somewhere over here. And again, it's kind of getting to the limits of being too small, but that's okay. And another town, and another town, and see if I can click another town. I got it off by like a couple pixels, but you can see the sort of the pattern that emerges. And I am being nitpicky, but let me turn this stroke weight down just so we can see things just a little better. And yeah, that's not too shabby. Well, now of course I'm gonna get my mouse coordinates way off, but whatever. Yeah, so you can see that when I call mouse pressed, what I do is I draw a town. And what is a town? A town is 4 blocks and 2 roads. And then what is a block? A block is 4 houses. And what is a house? Well, a house is a rectangle, a triangle, and then a bunch of other stuff. So you can see the sort of hierarchical nature of your code, of a program. And this, I hope, highlights the sort of strengths of the ability to create a function. So if you started with a goal of, hey, draw this, draw what's on the screen right now. So call this whatever you want. Let's call it a city, just for the ability to talk about it. So if I said, hey, your goal is to draw a whole city, and your city will have, I don't even know how many houses this is. It's 64, I think. So your city has 64 houses in it, and it has 4 roads and 4 intersections, and each block is 4 houses. Like starting from that end of it, that's really hard. Like I wouldn't know where to start. Like 64 houses, what do you mean? Oh my god, that's going to take me a year to draw 64 houses. But if you start from the other side of it, so it's more like the bottom-up approach, it would be called. If you break that problem down and you say, okay, instead of worrying about drawing 64 houses, I'm going to worry about drawing 1 house. And that's what we did. We started last night, or in the last video, whenever you watched it, with this draw house function. And that's all we worried about. We didn't worry about the town, we didn't worry about the city, we didn't worry about the roads. We just drew a house. And that let us sort of focus on one part of the problem. And then we iterated on that. We said, now that we have the ability to draw a house, now I can zoom out 1 level and I can draw a block, which is 4 houses. And then again, we iterated on that and said, now that I know how to draw a block, now I think I can draw a whole town, which is 4 blocks and 2 roads. And then, you can look ahead to like the next video. But now that I have the ability to draw a town, now I can draw a whole city, which is, maybe exactly what we're looking at on the screen already. So it lets you take what might otherwise be a huge problem and break it down into smaller pieces, and then build those pieces back up so that eventually you look at it and you've accomplished that big unwieldy goal. And I said last night that has a lot of implications in like professional software engineering stuff, so I won't ramble too much about that. But if you're starting out, you're learning how to create functions, I think it's important to sort of highlight the why behind why creating functions is important. Not just for your own ability to organize your code and create things like this, but also for the ability to work on a team. So you might imagine that you have a group project, say with, 4 people, and it's one person's job to only focus on the roads. You want to make the roads look as cool as possible and maybe have like cars on them and stuff. And that person goes away and focuses on something like a draw road function. And it's somebody else's job to draw a house. It's somebody else's job to, maybe your town has like schools and playgrounds and factories in it. Each person could take on one of those tasks. And then it's maybe another person's job to combine all of it and treat those functions exactly like you would treat any other function, like circle or square or rectangle or ellipse or triangle. Being able to treat them as units that you can then use without really worrying about the details of how they work internally. Anyway, yeah, so that's kind of the power of creating functions. So from here, I think I'm going to call this kind of the end of the video. I'm going to clean this up a little bit, maybe take this back to, I changed a bunch of things while I was rambling. I'm going to change this back to not using mouse press and just kind of drawing a static scene, and then I'll post it. And then my next video, I'm not sure if it's still valuable to try to go to the next level of Draw City, because I think you kind of get it, but I might just kind of play around with it and see if I can do anything that's more interesting. So that'll be kind of the next video, but I'll post that. So I'll post the link to this code in sort of the description of the video, and a link to Happy Coding. Please come say hello if you find this stuff interesting. And yeah, other than that, I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, and thanks for watching. And of course, as always, happy coding.